this session. My name is Rosalinda Ortiz, and I'm a first-year doc student at Ball State University. Um, so what I'd like to do, each of you has a handout, which is basically a synopsis of the paper that I wrote. Just a little bit of background. I'm a first-year doc student, born and raised in Texas my whole life. And so some of the salient issues to me are Hispanic culture, along the border, first-generation college students, and really how can we help students matriculate to college. And so a lot of the presentations that I saw yesterday really did center around, your pathway to college and how you got there. And so it was really, I was really happy to know that you can talk about your own journey and your family. And we also had a presenter that asked, is Texas South or is it West? And it's South, so a lot of the research, it's nice to see the people that are doing work, they're doing it from all over the country, all over the world, and they're looking at issues that are salient to them. And so one of the issues that's very salient to me is my culture and is my family. So I was very fortunate in my Women and Genders class with Dr. Mulvihill that I got to write an oral history about my family. So you can see my parents have been married for over 44 years this year, and they have 5 daughters. I'm the fourth of 5. On both sides, they are, no one has ever gone to college, so we're all, on both sides of the family, we come from big families, but we're the first in either side of the family to all go to college and graduate. So what I was thinking was, what makes us unique, what makes us different, and how did our parents influence us to continue and persist to college and go beyond? So basically that's what this presentation is all about, talking about our story. So just to get a little bit of background and why I do this, as statistics show, the Hispanic population is the fastest growing population in the United States. We make up about 17% of the population with about 55 million people across the country. But yet much of the research kind of works from a deficit model. They talk about Hispanics and why they're not persisting. They talk about why they're not graduating. They're dropping out. They're getting married and having families early, and they're not persisting into higher education. So for me, I thought I don't like to work from that negative model. And I thought the issues in the Hispanic culture are so important. So how can we use that as a positive, and how can we use that to promote education? And so that's exactly what happened in my family, and so I thought I'd highlight that for this particular presentation. So one of the big issues that I talked about was familismo, and you can see that it's the cultural importance of family unity, loyalty, cooperation while placing the family as the primary unit of importance. So basically, everything in the Hispanic culture that we do revolves around our family, bringing pride to our family, showing respect to our family, following their wishes and their ideas, and their support is so important to our success. I thought about different frameworks to use, and I couldn't find any of them that fit my family in particular, but this cultural idea of familismo did work for us. So let me start talking about a little bit about my family. So these are my parents, Oscar and Rosa Ortiz, and then starting from oldest to youngest, Claudia, Oralia, we call her Lala, Mary, that's me, and then that's my youngest sister, Christy. We were all born between the years 1974 to 1979, so we were all a year to a year and a half apart. So we grew up together, raised the same way, taught the same things. There was no really big gap between the years that we went to school. So my parents both are from Mexico. My dad was from Tamaulipas, and my mom was from Ciudad Acuña. So they both immigrated to Texas. My dad went to the Army. After 2 years, he came back, was working, met my mom at a cafe where she waitressed. Within 6 months, they were married. Within a year, she started having my oldest sister, and then proceeded right along after that. So we've all been a very tight-knit, close family. What I wanted to do when I did this original project was thinking about the ideas of oral history and bringing voices to people that are usually marginalized or silenced. And I didn't want to do that to any of my family members. I wanted them all to have a platform to talk. So in my methods, I made sure to interview all of us. So all 5 of us, including each of my parents. I made 13 standard questions, but then after each one, I throw in some extra questions because each of us has a little bit of a different story. So I added some questions that would fit to everybody's particular situation. The interviews lasted for anywhere from 15 to 50 minutes. The 15-minute was my dad. He is a very succinct person, but the rest of us, all the rest of the girls, were talkers. So we were at the high end of the time. I audio recorded them. I transcribed them verbatim. So you'll see and you'll read in the quotations. I used their words, how they said it. And what I thought was very interesting is sometimes they would talk to me as a researcher. Sometimes they'd talk to me as a sister. Sometimes they'd talk to me as a colleague or a peer or as a little sister or a big sister. So there's different voices even in the sentencing. So I thought that was interesting because they'll say you or y'all or they or we or, so you'll see that. And that, that switching is very interesting to see how much power they let me have in telling their story, but also how much power they wanted to have for themselves in telling their own story. I used a lot of reflexivity too because I wasn't just the researcher, I was also the participant. So I always had to look at my role and what am I doing? How am I doing it? How does what I'm finding reflect who I am? And how can I tell their story in a positive way? Always looking at those dual roles. And then also I used meta discussion. So even after the original interviews, at dinner, afterwards, when I talked with one sister or they talked to each other, they would talk about this. And it would be like, what did you say? How did it go? Was it right? Was it wrong? And we constantly, have that as a source of discussion to see what all, was happening in there. And so that also framed how we felt about what we were thinking and our stories as well. So that also was a part of it too. So basically, I had more themes than this, but for this particular paper, I divided it into 6 themes. And as I said earlier, there was no one framework that worked, but familismo did, because it was a guiding value that really went into each of these themes. So the first one was college was a requirement. The second was getting good grades, financing your education, beyond getting a degree beyond your bachelor's, motherhood and work, and influencing the next generation. So those are the 6 themes that I was working on. So as college is a requirement. So the only one thing that every answer was the same from my parents to all of my sisters is that you are going to college. There's no choice about it. They didn't know how we would get there. They didn't know what we would do. They just said, there is a college, go. Figure it out and we'll help you. And I think that was really important because neither of my parents had that experience with college. My mother didn't graduate high school. My dad was a high school graduate. But they didn't have any college experience. So there's this big idea of what college is, but they didn't know what it was like, how to get there, how to help us. And so they really did push us to be independent, to go search that out. But they always had that support at home. So I think my mother said it best whenever she talked about college as a requirement. She said that we should go to get an education because they were females and Hispanic and needed to be ready in case their future was not a success. Or when they married and it failed, they could stand on their own 2 feet. You have to do for yourself. In your marriage, growing up, we had to make do with what we had. We didn't ask for more. Somewhere we felt there was always more. I want my kids to depend on themselves and do what they want to do. Take a vacation, buy a car, own a house. We always rented. We could never afford it. So it was always important for my parents, and I think because we were all girls, to be independent and self-sufficient just in case our marriages didn't work out, for one reason or another, or we needed to help support our family in this new generation of growing up. So that was one of the biggest themes that came out of it that all of us could agree on. The next one was getting good grades. So my parents knew, while they didn't know much about college, they knew the only way to get there was to get good grades in elementary, middle, junior high, and high school. So the expectations were very, very high. It wasn't about just passing. You know, a C was okay in school, but for them, it was all A's. And my oldest sister, you know, all five of us said the same thing, but I think my oldest sister, Claudia, she said it best. She said they expected us to do the best in school and get good grades. Good grades were A's, but high A's were better. Hundreds were the best that you could get. All A's were good. A's and B's were okay, but try to bring this B up. C's were absolutely not acceptable. Groundings occurred, spankings occurred. You know, it happened to me. They took me out of drill team because I made a C in theater arts. I mean, that was how important grades were to them. They couldn't help us with our homework. They would say, ask your sister or ask your teacher. They couldn't help us, but they knew you have to get good grades. So that was definitely a big salient issue for all five of us growing up. We had to do the best in school that we could be. Not because we might be punished in school, but we'd be punished at home if we didn't do what we needed to do. Financing college was another important issue. While my parents, we weren't rich by any means, and my dad was the sole provider for all of us, they knew that the only way to get to college is for them to finance it themselves. They didn't know much about financial aid. They didn't know how to fill out the forms, and they really even were hesitant about giving us even our social security numbers to find that out. So, you know, they always said, go to college, pick wherever you want to go, and we'll pay for it. We'll figure it out when you get there. You know, so that money was never something we had to worry about. Our books were always paid for, tuition. I don't know how, because there would be times where there was 3 of us in college at one time. But you know, they did what they could, and they always found a way. But for us, we didn't want that extra burden for our parents, so we would actually take on part-time jobs even though they didn't want us to, because we didn't feel like we should ask them for extra money. So just taking on some of that responsibility and helping, you know, for our own little things, we all took on part-time jobs. One of the things that I found interesting is that while they did encourage us to go to college, anything beyond a bachelor's degree, they didn't understand and they didn't really see as relevant. They thought college was 4 years, and that's it. So it wasn't really supported. I was the first one, so I'm the fourth of 5, so I was the first one to say, I want to go to graduate school, I want to get my master's degree. And they didn't know what it was, and they were like, no, you know, you need to get a job, you need to grow up, you know, that's what you do. At the time, I was a single mother, so they're like, you need to start providing for your son. And that was like the first time that I had to like stop and say, I'm going with or without your help, you know. And so you can see, I said they believed that graduate school was just prolonging growing up and getting a real job. Could have been because of my situation, being a single mother, but they didn't support my decision to have a master's degree. It wasn't until I finished my master's and I could support myself and my son that they actually saw, wow, it does mean something, and you can do it, you know, without anybody's help. And after that, they were all excited about a master's degree, and, you know, they encouraged my sisters to go back and get theirs. And the great thing is now that I'm pursuing my doctorate degree 10 years later, they're like, okay, you know, we understand, we get it, we support you. They didn't like that I was going so far away. I'm in Indiana now, but they're okay with that, and they support it because they know what it means to me and what it can do for me. So all 5 of us are mothers now. So there's 11 kids between the 5 of us. Claudia has 3 boys, Lala has a boy and a girl, Mary has 2 girls and a boy, I have a boy, and Christy has 2 little girls. So we all raised our families together. They've always been together. They're raised like brothers and sisters. We take care of our nieces and nephews like they're our own children. So motherhood and work is really important, and how we decided to pursue the different fields of education that we had. So basically, everything that we chose to do, we wanted to go to college, but the jobs that we chose were to make sure that we were able to make motherhood a priority, because we all knew we wanted to be mothers. We all knew we wanted to take care of our children and be, you know, the primary caregivers of our children. My sister Mary, she was probably the smartest out of the 5 of us, and she, from her freshman year in high school, She had a plan. She was going to be an engineer. She was going to go to A&M. Everything was going to work. Her junior year, she met her now husband, fell in love, and completely changed her plans because she knew that this was going to be her life. And she said that. She said, I think maybe back then, not that I didn't think I could be that, an engineer, I do think about how many women were in the field and how many Hispanics were in the field, but I feel like I'm more in my place in our culture being a teacher. I'm not saying I gave up, but I kind of did what Mom did. I did go to college, but I became a mother, and I'm trying to put that first. I stayed in the field that allowed me to be a mother as a priority. And that's really what we all did. So 3 of us are in the education field, and 2 of us are independent business owners that work for our family businesses. So in the interviews, I have both stories in there and how that works. For being an independent owner, they can come and go as they please, but being in education, they could work their holidays and weekends and things like that. So keeping motherhood as a priority was very, very important to all of us. And we made sure that that was something that we could do throughout our lives. And then finally, the last section is influencing the next generation. So we wanted to see, or I wanted to see, how much of the themes that our parents taught us are we instilling in our children now. And so basically, we still have that idea of you are going to college. It's not a choice. But the reason behind it is different. So my parents told us, you go because you need to help support your family or in case your marriage doesn't work out. But the messages that we give to our children are so that you can find a career that you love, so that you can be self-sufficient, not so that you can be dependent on, not because you were depending on somebody else. So the messages were actually the same whether we had boys or girls. And, well, I say that for the most part. One of my sisters was very much the traditional, my son can do this, my daughters have to do this. So my youngest sister, Christy, she has 2 little girls, and she says, they know even at this age we start with happy faces. They are expected to get good grades, that they are expected to try their best. I do expect nothing but the best from both of them, just as my parents did. I'll probably be just as strict as my parents were. They have consequences for bringing home sad faces or not making satisfactory progress, but they do get rewards for reaching milestones. They know my sister is in college in Indiana, and they know that she is trying to get smarter. We go visit my nephew and niece in San Antonio who attend UTSA, and they know that is where you go to get smarter and to have a good job. So even at 4 and 5 years old, they're introducing them into the college life. This is where you go. This is why you go there. What are you going to be? So that's definitely a recurring thing that we instill in all of our children, now and probably forever. We will change the course of the next generations in our family because, my parents were so insistent that we all go to college. So in conclusion, the implications, what did I think? Basically, having a close-knit family, these ideas of feminismo is not a deficit. Much to the discussion in the literature out there about, how Hispanics aren't succeeding, they are dropping out, they're not persisting as quickly as other populations. I don't think having these cultural values is a negative. If we look at it from a different perspective, we can take these values and see how it can be a positive, just like the example that I gave with my family. And I am in no way saying that my family represents all families. I'm just telling one story of how it can work and how it did work with our family. My parents use this connection to foster high educational goals. Children often will rise to meet those goals when they're put there. So, it's just an encouragement that we do that as parents and family members to set the bar high, and our children will reach that or even go beyond that that we ever thought was possible. So I want to leave you with my final conclusion. I said creating this project was wonderful for me, and I'm going to try not to get emotional because I always do this when I talk about my family. Creating this project was wonderful for me because for the first time I felt I could connect with my family about the scholarly work that I'm doing. Oftentimes my family does not understand what my research entails in graduate school or the topics that I present at conferences. This project has brought us closer as a family because everyone had a platform to share their memories through storytelling. They felt excited and honored to be a part of my work, and I felt connected and valued by my family, not just as a daughter or as a sister, but as an ambassador to outsiders interested in knowing about Hispanic family culture. Through this oral history, I hope to honor my family by telling their story using their words and their ideas. I especially hope to honor my parents for all of the sacrifices they have made for my sisters and I to become successful. Now, as parents, I hope that our children will carry this sense of familismo into their future endeavors. So, thank you, and I'll take any questions. Yes.
Well, let me share a thought I had, and then you can tell me if I'm
Okay.
wrong about that in my interpretation of it. It seems to me that it was really fortunate that your parents had a clear message, clear, straightforward message, and they didn't know all the particulars about getting there that you and your sisters now know with your children, but they kept that message clear in front of you, and it didn't get muddled.
Right.
And now you said that you still have the same messages for that message you need to go to college with your children, but it's a bit more nuanced, and also, and I'm thinking that you can do that because of the success you've achieved. You've moved off of step one, and so you're not. It's not so close to the edge, and also you and your sisters have the cultural capital now.
Yes.
To know, well, this is how you apply, and this is how you can handle financial aid and so forth. And so that's the big difference. You do not have to have this one message that's clear and figure it out, which they had to have, but they, to their credit, made it clear. It'll be interesting to see how, in subsequent generations, what the message needs to be. And now you want a career you love, and that's appropriate. But I think probably it was very appropriate for your parents to frame it in the way they did.
Yes, and you're right, and that's exactly another discussion and a future endeavor that I want to pursue is what do our kids think the messages are? Did we repeat some of the messages that were given to us? And fortunately, I'm in my first year of my doc student, so by year 3, there will be 2 more kids into the college realm or thinking about it, and the rest of the kids will be older, so they'll be in a place that I can interview them, and they'll have answers for me. So that's definitely something that I really look forward to. What I'm also wanting to do is interview my aunts and uncles to see what their parents told them and what they tell their kids, so that I can compare them with my cousins on both sides to see, where was the in-betweens, where were the messages that were sent and may not have been received. So definitely the generational aspect is something that I really want to look into as well. And you talked about capital. In my other research projects, I talk about social capital, I talk about cultural capital, things like that. So that's definitely some issues that I look at as well. Yes.
Going to overwhelm you with a lot of stuff, and I'm happy to chat with you to unpack a lot of these things after, but I don't want to monopolize. Thank you very much. The work you're doing is very excellent. So thank you for that. Don't know whether, doing the oral history, I don't know whether you're doing member check on when you have your transcript, you send it back for them to read it over and have an opportunity.
I wrote in there, what I did was, some of them are readers and some of them are not. My mom was not one of them. She's like, just tell me what you wrote. So I would read it to her and she'd be like, okay, this, that, and the other. A couple of my sisters were like, no, I want to read what everybody else wrote too. So it was, and then it was a lot of meta discussion. So I'd give them everything that I did. If they wanted to hear it or if they wanted to see it, they'd look at it. If they had any changes, they'd give it back to me. So that's kind of how we worked through it. I will say that nobody else could have done this on my family. They wouldn't have talked to them. They just wouldn't have. So I was probably the only one that could get the answers that I needed to get from them because I was part of the family and they were willing to go down that road with me. So I used a lot of that.
You made a comment that.
Wait, can I? Because we started late and we're
Oh,
out of
okay.
time. I think I.
Yes, thank you very
We'll
much, but
continue
we'll
after.
definitely,
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
can talk afterwards. So again, thank you very, very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. So Courtney Robbins is up. Empathy and Gender in the Age of Trump, Perspectives of Educators. Wow.
Yeah, it's a bomb.